They say family is supposed to be your biggest support system. But Zoe? She made it her mission to make me feel small. Every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering. I was just the shadow next to her spotlight. But the day I realized I didn't need to compete, I just needed to shine in my own way, was the day everything changed. What I did next. Let's just say, Zoe never saw it coming. I'm Miriam. And if I'm being honest, there was never a time in my childhood when I didn't feel like I was standing in someone else's shadow. That someone. My cousin Zoe. Zoe was the golden girl of the family. Always had been. From the moment she could walk, she seemed to float instead of stumble, twirl instead of trip. At family barbecues, people used to say she could light up the backyard just by smiling. That girl's going places, my Uncle Robert once said, balancing a paper plate full of ribs and corn on the cob, eyes twinkling as Zoe sang a perfect rendition of some Disney princess ballad under the flickering string lights. Everyone clapped. I remember standing there with my lemonade, watching her, and wondering, what do I have that people clap for? Zoe had the charm, the grades, the perfect hair, blonde, shiny, always in some Pinterest-worthy braid her mom had styled that morning. Mine. Brown, thick, usually in a messy ponytail that I'd tug loose by noon. She got straight A's and still found time to volunteer at the animal shelter. I worked hard, really hard, but when I brought home a report card with all A- and 1 B+, my parents said, "Great job, honey," but I'd catch the flash of disappointment, like they were hoping for just a little more. The way they smiled at Zoe's perfect scores felt different. Warmer. Brighter. Realer. It didn't used to bother me. Not really. When we were little, I adored her. She was like a big sister to me even though we were the same age, born only 6 weeks apart. I used to trail after her in the yard, pretending we were fairy princesses or secret agents, or whatever game she invented that day. She always led, and I followed. That was just how it worked. I thought it was normal. I thought that was what love looked like. But as we grew up, something shifted. Somewhere between middle school and freshman year, I started noticing the pattern, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Like the time of my 14th birthday. I'd been planning that party for months. Unicorn themed. Yeah, I know I was probably too old for it, but it made me happy. I'd made handmade invites, bought glittery pink decorations, and even convinced my mom to rent a cotton candy machine. I wanted it to be mine. Just one day where I could be the center of attention. But Zoe showed up wearing a sequin dress that looked like it belonged at the Grammys. Everyone gasped when she walked in. "Wow, Zoe. You look amazing. Where'd you get that dress?" My Aunt Sharon cooed, snapping pictures on her phone. Zoe grinned like she hadn't just hijacked the whole vibe. "Oh, just something I threw on. Miriam's the real star today." She nudged me gently with her elbow, smiling sweetly. I smiled back, because what else was I supposed to do? Say, "Actually, Zoe, you're stealing my thunder and I hate it?" Instead, I blew out my candles and swallowed the tight, sour knot building in my chest. It wasn't just birthdays. At school, teachers would always ask if we were related. "You and Zoe Henderson, cousins, right? She's such a star. You must be close." I'd smile and nod, but I hated how they said it, like her glow automatically made me special by proximity. Like I wasn't enough on my own. One afternoon, in sophomore year, we were both up for a spot on the yearbook committee. I'd stayed up nights working on my portfolio. I printed drafts, collected mock spreads, even designed a sample theme around hidden stories. You know, the kind that don't make the front page. I poured my heart into it. Zoe walked into the interview with a glossy binder filled with Instagram-style collages and said, "I just want to make the yearbook beautiful. Something people will actually want to look at." She didn't even glance at my ideas. They picked her. Of course they did. She was sparkly. And I was not. The worst part was, she wasn't cruel. Not in the obvious way. Zoe had mastered this subtle form of dominance, disguised as kindness. Compliments with tiny blades hidden in them. like at Thanksgiving, when we were 15. I had just gotten new glasses, big round frames I thought made me look artsy. Zoe leaned in across the table and whispered, "You're so brave for wearing those. I'd never have the confidence to pull them off." She smiled again, like she'd just handed me a gift. But it didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a punch wrapped in wrapping paper. At home, I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling fan, letting it whirl above me like a carousel of thoughts. I'd ask myself over and over, why do I always feel smaller when she's around? I wasn't jealous. Not really. I didn't want to be her. I just wanted to be seen, too. The thing is, Zoe made sure everyone knew I was just the second best cousin. Never directly. Never in front of adults. But among our peers? Oh, she knew exactly what she was doing. Like during a pool party at our friend Ava's house. A bunch of us were hanging out, sipping sodas and joking about childhood crushes. Zoe turned to me, her voice sugary sweet. "Miri, remember when you used to follow me around like a little duckling?" She laughed. "You were so obsessed with me." People laughed. I laughed too, because what else was I supposed to do? But I could feel the blood rush to my face. I wanted to disappear under the pool float. Later that night, I stared into the bathroom mirror at Ava's house. My makeup had smudged under my eyes from the chlorine, and my hair clung to my face in limp, wet strands. Zoe's reflection floated next to mine, flawless as always. "Don't take it personally," she said, leaning in to adjust her mascara. "I'm just teasing. You know that, right?" I nodded. But I didn't believe her. Not anymore. There were moments, brief flashes, when I wanted to scream at her. Why do you always have to win? Why can't I have something for myself? Just once. But I didn't scream. Instead, I smiled. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I told myself to be patient, to be kind, to be better. That it wasn't a competition. Except, it always felt like a competition. Even our parents fed into it. I remember during a family dinner, Zoe casually mentioned she'd gotten accepted into a summer program at Stanford. Everyone gasped, clapped, offered congratulations. My mom turned to me and said, "Well, sweetie, you'll find something eventually." Eventually. Like I was a late bloomer, not worth picking just yet. It got to the point where I'd brace myself before every family event, mentally preparing for the comparison game. I'd pick out outfits carefully, rehearse my answers to "What are you doing this semester?" and "Any plans for college?" I learned to deflect, to laugh, to fake confidence like it was perfume I could spritz on. But behind the scenes, I was unraveling slowly. I started journaling at night, just to hold on to my sanity. Pages filled with lines like, "I feel invisible. Does anyone even notice when I'm gone? Why do I feel like my whole identity is based on how different I am from Zoe?" Still, I didn't break. Not right away. Something inside me, some quiet, stubborn part, refused to let her win. I didn't know how or when, but I promised myself that one day, I'd show her. I'd show everyone what they had missed while staring at her spotlight. Because what no one seemed to realize was, even a shadow can learn how to glow. But back then, I was still just Miriam, the second best cousin. And Zoe made sure I never forgot it. There are certain moments in life that imprint on your memory so deeply, you can recall every single detail. What you were wearing, how the room smelled, the exact pitch of a voice that broke your heart without even trying. For me, one of those moments was Christmas Eve, 3 years ago. I had spent weeks practicing a piano piece for the family dinner. Not just any song, my song. It was a haunting little melody I'd written myself, layered with soft arpeggios and bittersweet transitions. I wanted to surprise everyone. For once, I wanted them to see something in me that didn't require comparison to Zoe. Something that felt like mine. The living room was glowing with gold string lights, cinnamon candles flickered on the mantel, and snow tapped softly at the window panes. The scent of roasted turkey and pine needles hung heavy in the air. Everyone was full, tipsy, loud. The kind of holiday chaos that makes your chest both warm and heavy at the same time. I sat down at the old upright piano in the corner, its keys slightly yellowed but still responsive beneath my fingers. My heart was thudding in my chest so hard I swore the bench might shake. I glanced up once. My mom smiled faintly, holding a glass of Merlot. Dad was fiddling with the TV remote. Zoe sat curled on the couch like she owned the house, a cocoa mug cradled in her hands like a crown jewel. I took a deep breath and placed my hands on the keys. The first few notes came out just as I'd practiced. Soft, steady, full of that melancholy beauty I'd worked so hard to capture. I felt the room hush ever so slightly, just enough that I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe they'll finally see me. And then, oh my God, you guys. Zoe's voice cracked like glass across the room, loud and sparkling with excitement. I totally forgot to tell you, I landed the lead in the spring musical. I froze mid-note. Heads turned. All of them. My aunt gasped and clapped her hands together. Zoe, that's amazing. Honey, you're just unstoppable, aren't you? My cousin David called out, you're gonna crush it, Zoe. My grandmother beamed, murmuring something about talent running in the family. No one looked back at me. I sat there, my fingers still poised over the keys, the melody evaporating into the din of Zoe's announcement. I glanced around, willing someone, anyone, to remember I was still playing. No one did. So I finished it. Quietly. A few last bars, half-hearted and muted. I let my hands drop to my lap. My throat burned. I swallowed it down. When I turned around, the conversation had moved on. Zoe was reenacting a scene from the play, her voice rising, dramatic and full of flair. People were laughing, clapping. My mom was already in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. The applause I'd hoped for never came. I didn't say anything that night. Not to Zoe. Not to anyone. But something inside me cracked. And once it cracked, it kept cracking. Because it wasn't just that moment. It was every moment. Like at my high school graduation. I'd finally made it. Valedictorian? No. But I'd worked my butt off to graduate with honors. I curled my hair, wore a pale blue dress that made my eyes pop, and felt, just for a second, like I could stand tall. Like this was my day. Then Zoe walked into the ceremony in a white dress. Not ivory. Not cream. White. Long, lacy, and dramatic. Like she'd either missed a wedding or was about to crash one. All the pictures. They looked like her engagement shoot. She posed in every frame, tilting her head just so, one hand on her hip, the other around my mom's shoulder. When I looked through the photo roll later that night, it was hard to even find one where I was the focus. And she didn't even go to my school. Then there was my first art show, something I'd been dreaming about for years. I got accepted into a small gallery downtown, and it felt like a tiny miracle. I'd spent late nights smudging charcoal sketches until my hands ached, pouring emotion onto canvas like it was my lifeline. Zoe. She showed up with a gaggle of her influencer friends, all in matching trench coats and sunglasses like some kind of fashion cult. They sipped wine, snapped selfies, and loudly commented on my pieces like they were critiquing thrift store finds. One of them leaned over to Zoe and whispered, just loud enough, "Is this like postmodern depression or something?" Zoe giggled, then turned to me and said, "Miriam, your style is so brave. I'd never have the confidence to wear something like that on a canvas." Brave. Not beautiful. Not talented. Just brave. I smiled through clenched teeth. "Thanks," I said, even though my insides were screaming. But you know what hurt the most? She was always nice about it. Zoe wasn't a villain. She never pushed me down the stairs or spread lies about me. No, she smiled. She complimented. She stood close and sliced me with sugar-coated words that left no bruise but plenty of damage. People loved her because they never saw the blade underneath. And it wasn't just personal. It was professional too. The summer before our junior year of college, I scored an internship at our uncle's PR firm. I had applied the old-fashioned way, cover letter, resume, the whole deal. I stayed up till 2 a.m. perfecting my submission. Zoe. She mentioned it at dinner one night and got an offer before dessert. Uncle Grant said he'd love to have me, she chirped, spooning tiramisu into her mouth like it was nothing. I smiled and nodded, pretending it didn't sting. But I thought, okay, this is my chance. I'm going to prove myself where it counts. The first day of the internship, I showed up 10 minutes early in slacks and a button-down, portfolio in hand. Zoe arrived 20 minutes late in a designer sundress, holding a matcha latte and talking loudly on speakerphone. And from day one, she made sure the office saw her as the star. She'd stroll into meetings, parroting phrases I'd said the day before. What if we position the brand as aspirational and relatable? She'd suggest, my words. Everyone would nod, impressed. She'd wink at me like it was some inside joke. I worked late, wrote proposals, designed social media plans. She showed up for the praise. And the worst part? She got it. One afternoon, after a brainstorming session where Zoe once again stole one of my concepts and spun it as her own, I confronted her in the break room. Hey, I said carefully, trying to keep my tone neutral. That campaign pitch, I'd actually been working on that all week. She popped the lid off a LaCroix and sipped. Oh, she said, tilting her head. Well, great minds think alike, right? My hands curled into fists behind my back. It was like she didn't even register how much it hurt. That was when it hit me. This wasn't random. This wasn't just an accident, or her being clueless. Zoe knew. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew how to stay just one step ahead of me, without ever looking like she was racing. And the world. It ate it up. So I started asking myself the question I had avoided for years. How do you outshine someone who needs to be the center of attention? Because if I didn't figure that out soon, I'd spend the rest of my life in her shadow. It happened quietly. Not with a grand gesture, or some orchestrated public call-out. No fireworks, no shouting match. Just a decision. A quiet, calculated move that started with me staring at my laptop screen late one night, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. I was in the office alone, the overhead lights humming softly above me, casting my shadow long and thin across the carpet. Most of the team had gone home hours ago. The coffee in my mug had gone cold, and the only sound besides the buzz of the AC unit was the occasional squeak of my office chair as I shifted my weight. I was tired, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I just watched Zoe take credit for yet another one of my ideas in a client prep meeting that afternoon. I remember her voice so clearly, bright, persuasive, full of that easy charm she used like a weapon. I was thinking we could gamify the product experience. Something like a badge system, she'd said, flipping her perfectly curled hair over her shoulder. Except that idea. That was mine. I'd sketched it out in my notebook days earlier. I'd talked it through with her casually, at lunch, while she scrolled through her phone. And now she was pitching it like she'd thought it up in the shower. Our boss, a guy named Derek, had nodded along, eyes lighting up. That's exactly the kind of direction I'm looking for, he said. And I just sat there, smiling, pretending like I agreed. Pretending like it didn't gut me. But that night, I reached a breaking point. I opened a blank email, addressed it to Derek, and stared at the subject line. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't going to let myself be erased. I pitched him a new idea. A bold, digital-first campaign for an up-and-coming skincare brand we'd been toying with in concept. But this one had teeth. I proposed a micro-narrative ad series told in reverse, starting with the customer's glow-up, then unraveling the journey backward in a series of 15-second mobile videos. It would be intimate, vulnerable, raw. It was the kind of campaign that felt like people, not just products. And I ended it with a simple request. Please keep this pitch confidential and attached to my name until further notice. I'd appreciate the chance to present it when the time is right. I hovered over the send button for a full 30 seconds. My heart was thudding in my chest, not because I was scared of failure, but because I was scared of being seen. For so long, I'd made myself smaller to survive next to Zoe. But here I was, saying, "This is mine. Don't take it from me." Click. I sent it. And for the first time in weeks, I went home with a sense of peace humming beneath the surface of my skin. The next morning, Zoe burst into the office with her usual air of effortless dominance. Her heels clicked across the floor like punctuation marks, her iced coffee sloshing in one hand as she balanced her tote bag on the other shoulder. "Morning, besties," she chirped, breezing past my desk with a wink. She always called everyone bestie, even the interns she couldn't name. I forced a tight smile. "Morning." She sat down at her glass desk, crossed her legs, and immediately launched into loud casual chatter with the guy 2 desks down. I opened my email, half expecting silence. But there it was, Derek's reply. "Love this concept. Let's talk about implementation. Keep it under wraps for now. We'll test launch next month under a dummy client and observe reactions." A thrill shot through my spine. I had to bite my cheek to keep from grinning. I looked over at Zoe, who was mid-laugh, scrolling Instagram between fake work tabs. She had no idea what was coming. 2 weeks passed. The test campaign launched under a fake skincare brand called Lunara. Derek had mocked it up with just enough polish to make it look like a real client, but not enough to raise any flags in the office. Zoe didn't even blink at it. But the moment it hit Instagram, it blew up. Engagement tripled. Comments flooded in. People asking where they could buy the product, who the agency was behind it, why it felt so real. Other teams started whispering about it in the break room. I watched the buzz grow like wildfire, feeding off curiosity. And Zoe. She leaned into the glow like it was hers. One morning in the conference room, Derek brought up Lunara's early numbers during a metrics meeting. "We're seeing organic traction on something that wasn't even supposed to move the needle," he said, pointing at the chart. "Whoever's behind this has real insight into our audience." I watched Zoe sit up straighter in her chair. She smoothed her blouse and said casually, "I think I might have mentioned something like that in our early brainstorms. Didn't I? You know, the whole reverse storytelling angle." My stomach twisted, but I stayed silent. This was it. The moment. Derek paused. He glanced at her, then turned to me. "Actually," he said, "that campaign came from Miriam. She pitched it independently a few weeks ago. Confidentially. From concept to execution, it's her work." The room went quiet. You could feel the shift. Like the air had changed temperature. Zoe froze. For a split second, her smile faltered, just a fraction. But I saw it. Her eyes widened ever so slightly, her lips parting in confusion. Then came the cover-up. "Oh," she said, recovering quickly. "Wow, Miriam. That's amazing. I guess great minds really do think alike." But she couldn't pull it off this time. No one laughed. No one nodded. They were all still looking at me. Derek continued. "This is the kind of innovation we need to spotlight more. Miriam, I want you leading the next phase. Build out a full pitch deck. You've got 2 days." My hands were trembling under the table, but I smiled. "Absolutely. Thank you." Zoe stayed silent for the rest of the meeting. When it ended, she gathered her things slowly, carefully. Her face was blank. But her eyes. They told me everything. For the first time since we were kids. Zoe looked lost. She didn't say a word to me as she passed by my chair, her heels suddenly quieter than usual. But inside, I was screaming. Not out of vengeance. Not out of pride. Out of relief. Because finally, the spotlight wasn't hers to grab. The campaign didn't just perform well. It exploded. Like wildfire through dry grass, it spread across social media platforms faster than anyone expected. Overnight, What had started as a quiet, under-the-radar test grew into a full-blown sensation. People were tagging their friends, influencers were sharing clips, and even news outlets began asking questions about the mysterious Lunara brand behind the campaign. Sitting at my desk on a late Tuesday morning, I remember watching the analytics dashboard with a mixture of disbelief and cautious excitement. The numbers kept climbing, engagement rates doubling, then tripling, the comment section flooding with genuine stories from viewers who connected with the message. It was raw, it was authentic, and that authenticity was something Zoe could never manufacture, no matter how much charm she tossed around. I could feel it. This was my moment, the first time my voice wasn't just background noise in the chorus of Zoe's spotlight. It was a quiet victory, but it roared inside me louder than any applause I'd ever craved. Days after the campaign went viral, my calendar began to change. Invitations appeared to strategy meetings I'd never been included in before. I found myself pulled into conference calls discussing upcoming projects, my ideas taken seriously, debated, and sometimes even adopted wholesale. What made it all surreal was that Zoe wasn't even CC'd on many of those emails. It was like the world I'd been on the fringe of was suddenly opening doors I hadn't dared knock on before. At work, the energy shifted. My uncle, Grant, the CEO and the man whose influence in the company was unmatched, noticed. I saw the way his gaze lingered during meetings, the nods of approval when I presented, the subtle smiles that said, "This is the direction we need." One afternoon, after a particularly productive brainstorming session, he called me into his office. The room was lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with worn leather-bound volumes and glossy marketing awards. The scent of rich mahogany and fresh coffee lingered in the air. Grant leaned back in his leather chair, hands folded calmly on the desk, eyes sharp but kind. "Miriam," he began, his voice low but steady, "I want to offer you a full-time position here. You've earned it, through grit and talent, not connections or charm." My throat tightened, and I blinked away the sudden sting behind my eyes. This was everything I'd worked for, validation from someone I respected deeply. "And Zoe?" I asked quietly, knowing the question hung heavy between us. Grant's smile was patient but firm. "She's talented in her own way. But this role, this is yours. Maybe she'll learn something from you." I could almost see the words echo in the silence after he said them. It was the first time I saw Zoe's name spoken without deference, without her usual glow of untouchable confidence. But it wasn't until later that week, in the cramped break room where no one else was around, that I truly saw her crack. Zoe stood there, her usual polished veneer slipping just enough for me to glimpse the uncertainty beneath. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "How did you do it?" she asked, looking me straight in the eyes for the first time without a mask. There was no malice in the question, just raw curiosity and maybe a hint of something I hadn't seen before, respect. And in that moment, I knew this was more than just a victory over her. It was the start of something new, for both of us. I remember the moment clearly, the kind of moment that feels like it stretches out and freezes in time, even though it's only a few seconds. We were standing in the kitchen of my small apartment, the faint hum of the city drifting through the cracked open window. The night air was cool but sticky, carrying the distant sounds of laughter and car horns. I could smell the faint scent of leftover takeout mixed with the faint hint of Zoe's perfume, something floral, sharp, and just a little too sweet. She was looking at me with that familiar mix of challenge and something else. Maybe confusion, maybe vulnerability. Her posture was rigid, shoulders squared like she was ready to defend a castle she'd always assumed was hers. But tonight, the armor was thinner. I could see it in the way her fingers twitched at her sides, the slight quiver in her voice when she finally spoke. "How do you keep doing it?" she asked, eyes searching mine as if looking for some secret I'd been hiding all along. I didn't flinch. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "You always told me I was second best. I just stopped believing you." The words hung between us, sharp but honest. I meant every syllable. It wasn't about proving her wrong anymore, not to hurt her, not to win some pointless competition. It was about stopping the ache inside myself, the ache of always feeling like I was chasing a shadow. Like no matter what I did, I'd never be the person everyone wanted me to be. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of years of silence lift a little. I didn't outshine you to hurt you, I told her quietly. I did it to stop hurting myself. She blinked, taken aback. For once, she wasn't the one controlling the story. For once, I was. The truth was, I had stopped playing her game. I stopped bending myself to fit the mold she'd set, always chasing approval, always trying to be enough for a family that celebrated her in gold and left me in the shadows. I began living by my own rules, carving out a space where my worth wasn't defined by anyone else's standards. And here's the thing. Gold doesn't need to scream to be noticed. It doesn't have to shout, or parade, or steal the spotlight. It just needs to shine, quietly, confidently, unapologetically. I could see it then, how the light inside me had grown. Not because I'd tried to outdo Zoe, but because I'd finally started to believe in myself. And that belief, it was more powerful than any spotlight she could steal. There was a pause. Zoe's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, she looked almost lost. Maybe realizing that the game she'd been playing was no longer mine to play. But here's the funny part, even after all this, Zoe still tries to be the center of attention. She still flashes that dazzling smile, still tells stories that make her the hero. Only now, she's got some serious competition. I'm not just playing anymore. I'm shining. And this time, the light's big enough for both of us.